Hey loves, how's it going? I'm here today to talk to you guys about a bonus video, or the topic of a bonus video, essentially, around all of these like spiritual buzzwords. I just want to say that I just pressed play on this and I'm sick. This is like the week of just the shit storm that we are in for the last week of Mercury retrograde in my family. But you know what? I don't feel like energetically super depleted. I actually feel pretty decent. I just have like a little bit of an achy throat and my nose is starting to run a bit. So I just kind of caught the tail end of like whatever it is that Quinn has. With that being said, like hopefully it doesn't get worse, but you know, you never know. So I apologize in advance, obviously, for this little raspy voice, but in the intention of being like super authentic and all of that, I was like, you know what? You guys don't really care. You just want to hear the message. It's not about making it perfect and all the things. So more of that here and less of the curated stuff is what I'm going to be moving towards, I think, as well. And by that, I mean, just like, sometimes we like overthink things, you know, or we want things to be a certain aesthetic or whatever, for whatever that means, because I'm pretty laid back. But, you know, we can like put a lot of thought into something and then be like, why, like, was it really worth it? So just showing up as ourselves is something that I'm encouraging myself to do more, I guess we could say. And then the other thing is that I'm filming this. Is this vertical or horizontal? Vertically. I always get those two mixed up. You know, there's like some things in the English language or whatever your main language is where there's like a bunch of like the word conscience was a word that I couldn't spell for the longest time, you know? Sometimes you'll just get like stuck on it. So horizontal and vertical are always two things that confuse the fuck out of me. So anyways, it is vertical though. This is vertical because I noticed that some videos could be filmed vertically, and then when you listen to them, even though they show up with like the two black bars on the upload scenario on YouTube, the way we're viewing them now with our phones as such can just like pull it into full screen. We're gonna test it out because obviously, and if you filmed anything, you know that this is true. It's way easier to film in this way because when it goes like in the horizontal, the horizontal way, I am literally like, which way the camera should I be looking at? Anyways, whatever. A little silly preamble to everything, but today what I really want to bring to you essentially is really something that I've been thinking about for the last little while. And something in the last few months even, I was like, someone needs to decode all of these like spiritual buzzwords, you know, because there's so many online and I find they just get thrown around. And for sure there's someone out there that's going to argue the inauthenticity of some of them and all of that. I'm not here for that today. I'm really just here to speak to how we can simplify some of these words. Now, one of the things that kind of, when I was thinking about this content stuff, I was thinking about like addressing this for you guys and why this was meaningful to me is because I find sometimes what I'm picking up on is we're using this vocabulary, we're using these terms, but we don't really know what we're saying. We don't really understand. And it's kind of like what I mentioned in the post where I polled you guys, seeing if you'd be interested in this. It's sort of like we're like, you know, one of the ones that just kills me is really just manifesting. I can't with that word anymore, because I think just the way that it's used so much, it has people behind it, for better or worse, intentionally or not. I like to think probably not intentionally, pushing a scenario on others or encouraging others to do a scenario that they themselves perhaps don't really fully understand. So for me, that can be a little bit triggering. We'll talk about that word too, because that for me just feels like, are you really walking the talk? Kind of thing, you know? And so I think that ties into a bigger thing of this spiritual world being really trendy in the last few years, okay? And I want to also, you know, this is one of the great things that's coming together through this community is I'm kind of uncovering by getting to know you guys, and that's why as I launched this, I felt it was so critical, and I keep mentioning it, like your collaboration in this community. Through you guys, I'm kind of understanding a little bit more of myself, who my people are, who I'm the person for, in terms of like you guys receiving my messages and relating to me, as well as my relationship with my spiritual journey, we could call it that. I have to say that if someone were to ask me, do you consider yourself to be a spiritual person? I would say yes and no. To be fair, I would say yes or no, and that's hits the mark on a lot of things with me. It's kind of like in the middle. So if I can give myself permission to say yes or no, yes and no, it's that a lot of the philosophies around spirituality, I have worked with some tremendously gifted and unique healers in the last 4 or 5 years, and they are definitely spiritual folks. They live and breathe and walk the talk of that scenario. But as I move towards this next chapter, let's say, I would say that in the last 4 or 5 years, I've really been in a transition phase. And as I move towards coming out into what's next for me and what my purpose is in the next chapter and who I am as a mother to Quinn, becoming a mother, feeling comfortable in that role. Quinn's going to be 2 next week at the time of filming this. And I'm just starting, sorry, I crack my knuckles sometimes. I'm starting to really realize that the first year was like kind of just insanity for me in all the ways that I didn't expect it to be. And now I'm becoming more of myself through this because I'm understanding what motherhood is. I'm understanding what it means for me. And in that role, I understand who I need to be a mother, but I also understand the sacrifice that I need to make, that sometimes I'm extremely vulnerable and uncomfortable and annoyed by. And then I also understand a little bit more about why, like the surrender a little bit of this week. We're going to talk about a lot of the words I just mentioned too. Like in this week and just having to lean in and really just accept that this is where I'm meant to be right now, even though my ego, which is the part of me that's like really programmed into performing and succeeding and doing and producing, and had spent 37 years, I turned 37 right after I gave birth, working, for and just answering to myself essentially, right? So now I have to answer to Quinn, and that was something I didn't anticipate, and it's something that I really struggle with because I get frustrated. So I forget kind of where I was going with all this, but all that to say that yes, okay. So my spiritual journey. So it helped me heal ultimately. It helped me understand my pain. It helped me understand my burnout in 2017, the spiritual community through the gate opener, the gateway kind of product, if you will, was crystals. I love crystals. They've become an integral part of my lifestyle. Do I still set intentions with them at every lunar ritual? Absolutely not. Not only because it has become just an integration into my life to have crystals around me and on me all the time, but also because I just don't have time. And so in that regard, I just kind of wanted to preface all of this by sharing a little bit of why I've been thinking about these spiritual terms, what my point of view on spirituality is, because I do feel, and I'm pretty confident you guys will agree, that it's a little bit confusing in terms of, for you guys, a little bit like, is she a spiritual person? I think she's a spiritual person. Self-awareness and growth and all the things she talks about, empowering women and believing in women and wanting to see women thrive. The dialogue around all of those things is in the spiritual realm a lot of the time nowadays. So like, does that make Steph a spiritual person? Like, is this going to be a spiritual community that I've just joined? So I just want to kind of like, there's a little bit of forgiveness around it for me because I am really leaning in. And what I mean by leaning in is I'm starting to kind of allow myself to go with the flow in terms of how I identify with the word spiritual. But what I will say tangibly and concretely, and how I'm going to identify the community around that, is that ultimately, loves, like, for me, the spiritual practices that I have taken on as my own are what I would also interchangeably, though it's by definition definitely not interchangeable, call like holistic and well-being practices. So it's all around like, and you guys who have followed me for a really long time have seen it all, like I went into a serious phase of zero waste, got rid of so much plastic in my life. I went into a serious phase of clean eating. I learned a lot around that went totally by the wayside when I got pregnant and all I wanted was fries and fucking root beer. I haven't found a way back to that, but I am sipping a green juice right now because I'm sick. So like there's a little bit of everything. It's like I kind of have adopted something from each of these practices that I have adhered to at one moment or another in the last 4 years, and I've made them part of who I am. And ultimately, I think that's what spirituality is for me, and that's what I really want to share with you guys and clarify with you guys and all of that. And I feel that it's something that I feel has made me, it's my story, it's part of my story, it's what's made me who I am today, and it's what's educated me as I've opened myself to educating myself as well around so much of, what I feel I want to show up as a teacher and as a leader, and as a community facilitator here. It is very near and dear to me, for sure. A lot of the spiritual world's beliefs. It has taught me a lot as well about my gifts. Astrology, of course, being a practice that I think that a lot of spiritual people are probably curious about astrology. It definitely has some roots, deep roots in some cases even, in spirituality. And, it's through connecting with astrology, connecting with various healers, and also understanding myself a little bit more through astrology and the work with those healers that I've understood what spirituality means to me. I'm a Sagittarius rising, which is, technically speaking, a pretty spiritual zodiac sign. It's the guru, teacher, the guide, the person that wants to show up for the well-being of others and really help them live a life that is non-materialistic and that is really founded and propelled by the opportunity to grow and to expand and to feel our best and just to feel really, really good. Literally spread your wings and grow and go wherever you feel called to, wherever your arrow points. And so I think just in a lot of those kind of elements right now, there's so much of me that has this calling and this penchant towards spirituality, but do I wake up every morning and meditate now? Absolutely not. I have no time for that right now at this stage in my life. And that's been another thing of that buzzword surrender for me. A lot of, I think, the tools and the practices that I've come by that I've done at some point or another in my life. I remember when Athena and I had our business, Star Sisters, early on, I was following the work of Natalia Benson, who, because I talk so much, I feel I have to mention this. She has exploded, Natalia, and I'm just not a fan of anybody's work that just kind of goes really, really big, because I can't relate to it anymore. It needs to be authentic for me, and that I think that version of authenticity to me feels that it needs to stay really, really small and relatable. But at the time, Natalia was much smaller. I met her through Eliza Kelly. I just mentioned her book on my Instagram. She's an astrologer that I worked with personally one-on-one in 2019 and into 2020 actually. And Natalia Benson, at the time, I remember when Athena and I were doing our business, she was talking about this ritual that she had every day where she read a few pages of her book, like a chapter in her book. She went for a workout, she made herself a juice, she meditated, she journaled. And I remember saying to Athena, I didn't have Quinn at the time, I was like, I'm super inspired by her. This was probably 2018. I was like, I'm going to start doing all that. And at the time I was spinning a lot. I was doing all these workouts. I was eating really clean. I was really prepping myself to feel my best. And I learned a lot through that chapter. And I remember Athena, who has 2 young kids, her kids are currently 6 and 4. Hi, babe. I know you might be watching this. 6 and 4. And at the time, I don't know what's though, they were 2 and 4. She was like, wow, must be nice, because she was like, there's no time for morning rituals. Now her kids are getting older, she has more time for her morning rituals. So it's about also understanding the ebb and flow of life and what season of life that we're in. And so all that to kind of say that this spiritual thing and how I am about it and what it means to me is really just another tool that I have come by in a no coincidence sort of scenario, because my life went down this path exactly as I was supposed to. And it's taught me a lot. And one of my greatest things that, of course, is the people that I've met. I'm going to have a coffee chat with one of my favorite people on earth, Georgina Durkin. She has helped me heal so much. We did a past life reading. I understood a lot about my past life, and that made me understand a lot about myself in today's world as well. And she's just this fantastic mentor, I would say. And I'm going to be speaking to her for an upcoming coffee chat. So coffee chat interview podcast style things are going to be loaded for the end of the year. I'm really banging a lot of those interviews and conversations out in the next coming weeks. So we're going to have a lot going on for that. So that's going to be really fun. So you'll get to meet her and connect with her. And some of you might have already even watched the coffee chat that her and I did together on live when I was doing them on Instagram back in the spring, summer. We chatted. So she's one of the amazing people that I've met. Karen Kenny is another lovely lady who I'm going to be speaking with too, actually, and you'll learn a little bit about her. These are 2 very authentically spiritual people, and I needed the guidance and support of these ladies to help me understand my true calling in my soul. In that regard, those friendships and those relationships that I've developed have really transformed me, and they're very near and dear to me. The other thing that's spiritual that I really carry very near and dear to me, and that has really changed my perspective on life and brought me a lot of peace, is understanding that we are all interconnected. Through my work in terms of like, yes, you can classify it as mediumship. I will talk to Georgina about that because she always tells me not to get stuck in the terms and to just like keep it open. I think the age that you and I are, that we are in, kind of helps us not identify so much with the terms, because I think this term thing, which is also what this whole thing is going to be about in a few minutes here, is really like is it the Gen Zs? Anyways, that younger generation right now, they're all about the words and they're all about overusing them and all the things. And so I think it helps us disconnect and detach from the terms, but sometimes I hear these words and I'm like, oh, am I that? And Georgie kind of checks me and she's like, no, don't worry about the words. But let's just say like I have a gift where when I really tune in, I can, what we would call channeling. I can connect with the other side. I can connect with spirits. I feel spirits all the time, and I felt them in my house. At first it was terrifying. We'll do a whole video on that if you want. But I've opened up to it. And the biggest, greatest gift that I have gotten out of this experience has really and truly been that I understand that the veil, the space between the people who have passed and the people who are present is extremely, extremely, extremely thin. And this has brought me so much peace. In terms of navigating, like I even feel like emotional about it. It's brought me so much peace in terms of navigating the human existence, because I feel, and I mean, okay, if there was like a gun pointing at my head or if I was going to die tomorrow, you know, like sometimes I feel sensitive to having this conversation with elderly people, because their point of view, mostly having not necessarily those that I know gone by a spiritual route, really feel like life is finite and like they're scared of death. They see it as the end of the world. It's the end of their life. And they have criticized or critiqued me, saying that to believe in that is because I'm young and I still have, you know, the opportunity to believe in that, and kind of like, because, you know, death is not imminent for me relative to how they feel themselves in their late 60s and 70s were these folks. So with that being said, I'm careful about who I share that with. That being said, it has brought me so much peace to understand that the souls, that basically we really are just souls in a human body, and astrology has supported that thought process and that belief as well. So those are a couple of spiritual things that I really find peace, that I've stuck with. A lot of the terms I'm going to talk to you about today, you will have heard me say a few of them for sure, here and there. And I think that this tool, in terms of this kind of lexicon of just breaking down some of these words, will feel really helpful for you, loves. And I invite you to share it with whoever you feel called to share this with. But, you know, a lot of these words I try and stray away from using a lot in my social feeds prior to the community, let's say, as well as in conversation. Or if I mention it in a reading, I try and explain it for the listener, for the person having the reading done, because, you know, this is a challenging sort of, these words can really, sometimes we're like, okay, yeah, I think I understand that. I'm supposed to understand that. So I'm just going to pretend that I understand it. Or I think I understand it, but actually your understanding of it might be a little bit different to what it actually means. Now, with that being said, like, who am I? I'm Stephanie Bordy. I'm not this like guru on all of these spiritual terms. This is just through the last, like, I would say 4 years of having heard them. And then through the last year of really thinking about how much people throw these fucking words around, and thinking about how can I simplify this and make this easier for myself to understand, and then help, in this case, you guys understand these terms as well. Before we move into that, I want to show you guys a book that I highly recommend you reading if you consider yourself to be someone who can potentially channel, or if you want to understand the signs that the other side communicates with us. This is by Laura Lynn Jackson. I read her first book, which was called, I'm pretty sure, The Signs. I think it's called The Signs. And she is a medium psychic. And is that how she identifies herself? Wife, mother, high school English teacher, and a psychic medium. So I discovered her, like many of us, if you've heard of her before, through the Goop series on Netflix. And I read her first book, and then I got this one as a tangible copy, because guys, if you have Audible, download this book on Audible. Her voice on Audible is the whole damn thing. Like, honest to goodness, this is one of the best books I've read her on Audible. This book for me, was transformative. I felt such deep relationship to everything she was explaining. It helped me open up even more to my gifts and understand them and try them out more. This was really fantastic. So maybe this is a sign for you, but this is a fantastic book, and it's amazing to listen to on Audible. I promise if you put it on Audible, you'll just be it will swallow you whole. You won't be able to finish it. You won't be able to stop before you're finished, is what I mean. So with all of that being said, let's sip my green juice. And this is, I bought frozen mangoes, and then I did spinach, and I did a banana, which was a total fucking fail because I don't have a blender. It broke. We never bought another one. So I used my juicer. Bananas, obviously, I didn't realize it. Didn't really think it through. Typical. Can't really be juiced. So it didn't really work. I would opt out of the banana next time. But if you have a blender, do it. So it's mango. I bought frozen mango. 1 banana. I did 4 small apples. Couple handfuls of spinach, and then celery, and I just put it all in the juicer, added water, and doubled it up, and this is it. So sipping on that, and it tastes really nice right now. I would maybe even do ginger. Another one that I love to make in the juicer is just fresh oranges with ginger. Really good this time of year. Okay, so here's the thing. I'm going to break down some of the words that I kind of came up with, and I have them on 2 different places, which is why you'll see me kind of glancing. And I would love for you guys to let me know not only your feedback and how this lands for you, but also if there's words that I haven't mentioned here that you kind of would have liked me to talk to. Don't be shy to mention them in the comments, because what I'll do is I'll just speak to them in the comments and what my version is of that word, or what the breakdown is, or if you're on Discord, feel free to ask me about this in the coffee chats thread on Discord, and we can take that conversation there and just speak more about this and all of that. So the first, I'm just going to go like in no particular order here. The first word that I have written here, they're 2, and actually they're kind of 2 in the same, is I have your voice, and then the second word is I have your truth. So or those 2 words, so many times we've heard like, use your voice, speak your truth. Use your voice, speak your truth. I really want to touch on those 2, because our voice in the context of like the spiritual world is pretty self-explanatory, I will say, but I'll just touch a little bit on it for the sake of clarity. It is aligned with our throat chakra. So we have 7 chakras, which are like these energetic meridians that start at a root chakra and work their way all the way up. And so throat chakra is located here. I've spoken a little bit on it before, how this crystal, which is blue kyanite, really helped me unlock my throat chakra. If you followed me for a while, you might even remember that I had a necklace that I wore for a really long time. 2018, 2017 too, that really helped me. And your voice and your speak your truth are kind of, for me, interchangeable, because the voice is empowered when we have spoken our truth, or when we speak our truth. And our truth is the feeling that we have when we are not bullshitting, the feeling that we have when we are not pretending that we feel something or don't feel something. It's the moment where we feel totally at peace, comfortable, and safe to speak up exactly as we are. Going back to Georgie, sorry not to bring her up so much, but she speaks a lot on the voice and the truth. Actually, she has this test that she's doing this year where she doesn't even tell a white lie. I forget who it's inspired by, but essentially she wants to everything that comes out of her mouth to not even be a white lie, like to just be full truth. And I find that an interesting challenge. I personally wouldn't be able to do it, because I fall more in the human category again than the spiritual category, because like sometimes you're just gonna tell a fucking white lie. But technically speaking, white lie in the spiritual world is not considered empowering your truth. When I first started my journey, speaking my truth was really important, because I found myself in a lot of situations related to boundaries where I would just kind of make myself small. I would shrink my identity. I would shrink my feelings. I would shrink myself in the context of a given exchange, just to kind of with someone else, just to feel like I could fit in, just to make them feel seen. And so our truth is, it's like me showing up here today, just really authentically, really candidly, just as I am, no bullshit, haven't even like put a makeup or done my hair or anything, and just kind of like speaking to you guys on these terms, really in terms of like what comes to me about them. It's feeling safe to speak that. It's the people that you trust that you can share that with, and there's going to be other people. And the Artist's Way is great, has a great exercise in week 2 about this too, is like, who are the people that you don't feel safe to share certain beliefs that you have, where you have to kind of put a filter up, that's when you're not speaking your truth. Now, for me also, At some point in my life, I had a corporate job. I worked at Lulu magazine. I worked at Elle Canada magazines. Like, when we have corporate jobs, we're not always going to be able to speak our truth, because we have to wear a little bit of a mask. We have to bullshit a little bit, because that's just the way that the world we live in functions and works, So speaking your truth is really just, at its highest level, I would say, starting from where you are and really starting to unpack where you lie to yourself and where you lie to others, where you deny yourself the space, the freedom, the permission to show up exactly as you are. So when people say, speak your voice, speak your truth, like share your voice, what they're really trying to encourage you to do is show up in full authenticity, show up exactly as you are, stop lying, stop making yourself small, stop giving yourself stop giving other people permission as well to make you feel insignificant. Stop hiding from what is meaningful to you. And sometimes, like, when we, a lot of you can relate to this, I'm sure, sometimes, and we'll talk more and more about it too, in terms of my journey, like coming from a high fashion world, guys, like the beginning of my career started out at Elle Canada, and then it was like Holtz, and then it was a small boutique. And I also worked at Savant Soie, which is a small Montreal knitwear company. I was in and out of big corporate high fashion and small family high fashion, I would say, or luxury fashion, we could say. It does feel a little bit like in that world, when we oftentimes feel burnt out and we feel suffocated and we feel insignificant and we just don't feel enough, when we change our beat, when we move to other things, we trigger others in our journey, and that creates, and we're going to talk about the word triggers. I'm actually going to write it down because I don't even have that written down, but it is a word that I definitely want to talk about. We trigger others in our journey, and those triggers will make them kind of like lash out at us, or make us feel like we don't have permission to say our truth, that we have to be kind of shy and strategic about who we share that with, that we have to hide from what's meaningful to us. So the thing about Speak Your Truth is just really a call to action to show up for what is meaningful to you, regardless, at its highest form, regardless of what anybody thinks. And I have to say, it's been challenging for me. I have Venus, which rules Libra, conjunct my sun. My sun and my Venus are both 14 degrees of Scorpio. And Libra is in the top half of my chart. So when it comes to me in my public life, Libra's energy overwhelms, and it makes me want to give everybody else space versus taking that space myself. So it's been a really challenging journey for me, boundaries, and in terms of like honoring my truth, like what is meaningful to me, which is showing up as this, strong voice for women, helping women feel their best, helping women feel comfortable to be their best. Believing in these alternative things like astrology, and sometimes your truth and tarot. Sometimes your truth is, sometimes you do have to be a little bit, I don't want to say strategic because that's a very, very low vibe word, but sometimes we have to be selective with who we share, because that's a boundary too. Is you're going to recognize that people don't respect you necessarily, but that speaking your truth and recognizing who's not respecting your voice and your point of view, that then eventually becomes a tandem situation where you feel like, okay, I know where I stand. I know who doesn't support me, and I have to create a boundary around who I'm going to share my truth with. And that's for your greater good and for your safety as well. So it's not about going out there and sharing your truth with everyone. Like, I don't go out and talk to astrology about just everyone, because I feel things out and I can kind of sense who wants to be open to it and that sort of thing. Yes, sometimes I make mistakes and I talk about it and I'm like, why did I share that? I shouldn't have shared that, But the point of the spiritual world talking about your truth, for me at least, it really landed for me at the beginning when I felt like I'd been hiding so much of what was meaningful to me, to the point that I wasn't even sure who I was. And so as you start to share a little bit, and that's the great thing about social too, is that you can kind of create a space online that allows you to move with confidence into sharing your kind of like your little secret. Your truth probably feels like a little bit of a secret, and it's sharing that secret with everybody, but also discovering the boundaries around that secret and who makes you feel safe to share that. Because if we go into places where we don't feel safe, our truth is just going to kind of shutter back into its into hibernation, if you will. We don't want it to be hibernating. So clearly a lot to say on the truth, because it's kind of a big deal, and it's a really, really big word right now. Another word that I had here is intention. Intention is really interesting. This is a word that obviously you're going to see a lot because we talk about lunar cycles and the full moon and the new moon, and it's like, and now it says be intentional, show up with your intentions. What are your intentions? How are you setting your intentions? Manifesting your intentions, right? So intention setting is the idea that in a first person statement, we are putting out there a sentiment that has already occurred in the future. The problem with this in the spiritual world is that oftentimes the people who are suggesting that we do this don't really understand the full scope of what intention setting is or manifesting for themselves. And so as a result of that, this is where kind of like we get into misinformation and that sort of thing, and this is why, I think it's important to have clarity on these terms, because so many of us are out there sharing our point of view on these terms, but we don't really necessarily know what the hell it means. And I've been at fault for that too, for sure, at some point or another. So even with the best of intentions, sometimes we kind of fuck up a bit. And so intention setting is just like a huge buzzword with manifest. Basically being intentional is just really being authentic, and all these layers kind of like domino effect layer onto each other, but to have an intention at its pure, its core form, let's say, is, write something out in first person as if it's already occurred. That is an intention. To be intentional with your word, to have intention with your word and your behavior, is to really show up fully embodied. It is to show up, that's to say that your truth, your voice, and your actions all mirror and support one another. They coexist, they all go together. So, intentions is a pretty strong standpoint to take. It's pretty impactful, it's pretty influential. And when we're talking about it in terms of manifesting, it can be a little bit of a slippery slope, because I think people are like, but I set an intention, why didn't it come true? And then they get discouraged, or like, why didn't this manifest? And let's talk about manifesting. Manifesting is the act of, putting something out there and into the ethers, or whatever you want to say, like out there into the thing. Like, I manifest $1,000. People, oh my God, there's so many coaches right now out there talking about manifesting money. So many of the coaches that I supported, that I followed, that I even worked with have now become like these business financial advising coaches. And like, it's just such a niche, and I just don't vibe with it at all. I think it's such bullshit. Because ultimately the gap with manifesting for me is that you actually need to do what's called the work. And the work, and I like to say it with a capital T, capital W, is showing up for the difficult moments, showing up for the things you don't actually want to be doing. That's what creates manifesting. The other thing too is that, like, manifesting is kind of this, it's a funny term in the spiritual world, because spiritual world is detachment from, technically speaking, the spiritual world is detachment from materialism. Manifesting is pretty much considered something associated with materialism. So it's kind of a slippery slope. But it's really the idea, the notion of putting an idea into the energy, into the universe that may be, and really owning it and stepping into the actions, the doing that's going to get you to create that scenario. There's a lot that goes with that. There's a lot of action that goes with that. If you're following the lunar cycles, you've also got to be paying attention to the triggers and the vulnerability that comes up, and you've got to be you got to be willing to be vulnerable. Vulnerability and manifesting are, to me, they really coexist together, because you cannot manifest really and truly without being open to where you need to have a little bit of grace and a little bit of humility. I think manifesting has a lot to do at an astrology level with Saturn, and it has a lot to do with Venus, of course. But that being said, again, it depends on where you are in life. If things aren't manifesting, it could just be because it's not your time. It doesn't mean it's not going to happen to you. It's just because it's not your time. And we have to think maybe a little bit around who's selling us the notion of manifesting, and like what their point of view on selling it is, So let me know a little bit about that. But yeah, manifesting is really the idea of putting something out there and then doing the action to get the reward, and at the same token not being discouraged if it doesn't happen, because it is a buzzword, and that means that it's thrown around loosely, abundantly, and doesn't necessarily, it's not necessarily tangible all the time. I want to say to, all these words kind of layer together, so I'm sorry I'm going a little bit all over the place, but the next word I want to speak to is intuition. Or intuition is a word that I've definitely used a lot. It's in my brand DNA, if you will, astrology, tarot, and intuition. Your intuition is the feeling that you have. It's the whisper. The beginning of my journey, it was not something that was involved in my day-to-day that much. And now it's something that I pay attention to all the time. So it's basically where I just prioritize the whisper instead of being scared of it. But see, like, if you want to be somebody, let's say, that is intuitive, or someone that's like, I really want to favor my intuition, and you're me in 2017 who hadn't really ever paid attention to that before, didn't even know she was empathic, to manifest being an intuitive, it takes the vulnerability, because intuition is oftentimes really, really scary and destabilizing for people, because it's the thing that you are so scared of. Oftentimes it's the thing also that makes you different in a scenario. It's the thing that's going to make you feel like an outsider. And that takes great courage, and that takes great vulnerability. So all of these things, you see, they really layer together. They really do have those similar themes of which spirituality really believes in, is just trusting, and trusting as being vulnerable. We'll talk a little bit about vulnerability in a couple minutes here, but so intuition is the whisper. It's the thing when you go out and you're you feel pulled to something really quickly, or you listen to someone talk and you're like, that's not for me, but you keep listening anyway. That's denying your intuition. It's waking up and being like, I don't feel that great, but I'm going to have a coffee anyway. Probably something I would do. Your intuition probably doesn't want you to have that coffee. It's, getting an offer for something and it doesn't resonate for you, but the pressure or the expectations that you've put on yourself based on what you will have to tell, the story that you'll have to tell to other people in your life, makes you feel at once like you have a pit in your stomach, like you really want to say no to that thing, or you really want to say yes to that thing. But then you start to think about the repercussions that you'll have to endure socially, and you ignore your intuition. Intuition is something that we can strengthen. I've heard it being called a muscle, and I totally agree with that. So yeah, and it's also something that, of course, going back to what I said earlier, connects us to our greater gifts. It connects us to our sensitivity. It connects us to the things that we pick up on sometimes that we're like, oh my God, for me, my intuition, when I saw that I had Neptune on my ascendant, I was like, okay, yeah, now I understand why stuff just comes through me, and I'm physically so porous and sensitive energetically, because my sense of intuition is so pervasive that I actually, was doing myself a great disservice and physical harm by not favoring it, and it's the part of me when I do a reading that sometimes I just get these nudges, and I just feel these things, and I used to worry about do I say it, do I not say it? Now I just say it, because oftentimes when we hide from our intuition, we hide from our truth, we devalue our voice. You see how it's all layered, right? I hope this is making sense. Let me know. The next word I have written down here is our shadow. And on the next one I have there's trigger. So these are interesting because these go together. Shadow's a really tricky one that I really wanted to bring up. It's maybe not a word that you guys hear often. I've been really cautious to not use it that much because it's kind of a complex word to unpack. I think it's the psychologist, Carl Jung, Carl with a C, and Jung with it's Jung, who first coined this term. Depending on the deep hole of spirituality that you've gone down, you've for sure seen this word. But the shadow is the dark side. It's the part of us ultimately that we fear so much. It's your baggage, it's your shit, it's your 8th house. It's sometimes your 12th house, but it's really your 8th house. It's really Pluto. It's where you feel like you are in survival mode when you enter shadow energy. And that's really, really uncomfortable and really triggering. We'll talk about triggering next. The shadow is the thing of you that makes you feel envious, that makes you feel jealous, that makes you feel insecure, that makes you feel, that makes you question your worth, that makes you talk down to yourself, that makes you talk down to others. Oftentimes the shadow is projected. And in the projected scenario, it means that if you and I are having an exchange And I have, let's say, like one of my shadows used to be, I really, really resented people who drove fancy cars. I was like, and I have nothing but fancy cars around me in case it was like a really uncomfortable like vibration to be in all the time. But like Audis in Montreal, the brand Audi, so many people have like these Q4s and Q5s and all these things. And I'd be like, oh, these like shitheads with their fucking nice cars. And it's like, I had to break that down. I had to look what the root of my issue was, and that's the shadow. Because ultimately, like, I'm projecting. But then what's interesting is I would attract a lot of people who had these Audi cars. And obviously I'd have to bite my tongue so my truth wouldn't be, you know, in service. And so it's, you know, the car has nothing to do with that, and the person has nothing to do with it. It has to do with my relationship with the brand of car in terms of what it signifies, in terms of the category of people, the type of people who shop those type of cars is what I was like assuming. Now my brother has an Audi, even my brother and his wife have an Audi. And so like what, like I'm assuming now or making these judgment calls that my brother's a shithead. He's absolutely not at all. Do you know what I mean? So I had to really work through my triggers, and they were really rooted in my childhood because I lack so much of the paternal energy, so much of my, I don't know my birth father or my stepdad is so challenging. It's such a challenging relationship. And he would just throw money at everything. Like there was just no masculine emotional support. And so ultimately my thought process and part of my shadow was, well, money is shit. And money creates problems, and it creates shitty people, and people do shitty things with their money. So that was a shadow that I had. It was like jealousy and envy, very Scorpio themes, you know, just feeling uncomfortable about someone else's stuff, but that actually had nothing to do with them. And then because I was projecting, so like putting it out there onto them, like being maybe even shitty towards some people, sometimes talking down about their friend who had a car. I don't know, this might have happened, you know, then I was also attracting, that goes into like the law of attraction, attracting people towards me who really stood for these things or had these values, and that created more of an issue. So it was like projection, and then kind of like, you know, the shadow, and then the what's the word I'm looking for? There's another word. I think it's like mirror. The mirror? Yeah, it's the mirror. You know, then it's the relationships are your mirror. It's what you need to, the mirror in that context, your relationship being the mirror, is it's also showing you a part of you that maybe your shadow wants to reject, your shadow doesn't want to accept. And so when you love yourself, when you show up, like how I worked through that was I was like, well, what is the root cause of this conversation that I have around these cars and these people who drive these cars? And it's because I was so triggered by not being loved emotionally as a kid and being given money to pay for things, that all of a sudden it became like, well, money doesn't equal emotional support, and emotional support is a value that I have over money. I had to unpack all of that, you know, and then it was like, okay, Steph, it's okay to have both. You don't need to be like this starving, emotionally supportive human in life, you know, you could figure it out. And so it's working through the shadow, working through the blocks otherwise, and working through, you know, the pain. A shadow is pain. It's working through the dark side of your person. It's working through the thing where you hear yourself not being nice to someone else, where you hear yourself judging someone else, where you hear yourself judging, and you don't really know why, where you hear yourself being mean or disrespectful or disregarding or just angry. You know, we all do it. Nick, my husband, is not a spiritual person. He judges all the time. I'm working through a lot of that with him. And I see a lot of our soul connection too, through just the way that he's like people who don't want to get vaccinated, for instance. His opinion is that they're stupid. And now a lot of his employees are folks who aren't vaccinated. And he's really having challenges with that because now the vaccine passport has been, you know, put into place. And it's been a really big growth for him. And it's, you know, that's a shadow. That is a shadow. And it's understanding that, you know, like, I mean, that's a heavy example that I just gave you guys because we're really in the thick of this debate right now, and it's really dividing a lot of relationships, but you know, you get it. So this video is going to be long. I'm sorry, loves. Okay. The next one that I have here is triggers, and triggers are basically situations where we feel attacked. Okay. That is a trigger. A trigger is where you feel attacked. It's when you're talking to someone and you're like, that makes me feel like they are personally attacking me. They're throwing me shade. They're saying something shitty about me. And you don't feel comfortable. You don't feel at peace. You get defensive, and you want to kind of bite back, you know? So, I'm going to keep triggers short and sweet because I think that's a pretty succinct thing. Let me know if you have more questions on triggers. I can expand more on that for sure. Surrender is here as well. Surrender is a word that people use all the time, and it's probably one of the words that has inspired me the most to do this video because I use it a lot, and I'll have the time I'm like, what the fuck is surrender? What does that mean? Okay, surrender is interchangeable with leaning in, letting it go. Basically, it means vulnerability. Surrender equals vulnerability. It's doing the thing you don't want to fucking do. It's like intuition, saying the thing, listening to the thing you don't want to listen to, you know, or your truth, saying the thing you don't want to say. And that's why vulnerability is such a big, I would say like all these words are an extension of vulnerability. In the middle is like the nucleus. Surrender is vulnerability. Surrender is, think about the next time that, you know, you hear the word surrender and you think about the context and you're like, does that make me feel like I need to be vulnerable? And vulnerability makes me uncomfortable. And I'm pretty sure we all know what vulnerability is, but basically it's where you feel exposed. It's where you feel like you're not hiding anymore. It's where you feel real. It's where you have shame and guilt and embarrassment and just you feel just so out of sorts with how you're showing up in the real world. It's like you wanted to hide from that. You wanted to protect that. Vulnerability and authenticity go hand in hand. You can't really have one without the other. And they're two of my favorite things in life. And I think a lot of yours too, because I know we have a lot of Scorpio energy in this community. And Scorpio, Pluto, Mars, all of that loves the vulnerability, loves the authenticity. It's like, show me what's real. Show me that I can be stronger and better for my vulnerability. And surrender to my vulnerability. So surrendering is like also situations like this week where, you know, I thought I was going to get all this work done and I had to actually like really lean in and really relax and really let my guard down. I had to just be like, hey, Steph, you know what? Like, you're a mom now. Like, this is an actual conversation that is in my head. Like, you're a fucking mom now, Steph. You've got to be okay with this is your priority. Quinn needs you. Like, your family needs you right now. Like, you're the main caregiver. You live away from family. No one can support you tangibly, realistically right now. You know, like, how can you show up and how can you stop chasing stuff that really is like, practically speaking, food's on the table, roof is on my head, clothes are on my body every single week, every day. I'm very fortunate in that way, right? So this desire to have a business, this desire to work is not something that Nick and I feel is necessary at this stage of my life. And so the fact that I really want to work, and that I, you know, and this is the setup that I've been handed right now where I have no support for Quinn and that he's sick this week, I had to really check myself and I had to surrender. I had to surrender to the thing that I really, really wanted, and I had to do the thing that I didn't really want to do, which is kind of put work aside and prioritize him. That for me is vulnerability, because ultimately, you know, for whatever reason and a bunch of reasons, and we can go into that much later too, is like my main focus right now needs to be Quinn. It needs to be learning to care for someone else right now at this stage. And it's very, very triggering for me. And it's very uncomfortable for me. And it asks me a lot of surrender because I'm programmed. You see it in my birth chart too. Go, go, go. What's next? Do, produce. And it's also in the way that I was raised. I was never given affirmation and confidence and support to be who I am. And then that was enough. It was like, what more can you do? One of the things my mom told me growing up all the time, and this shows at this stage of my growth and my spiritual journey has taught me a lot more about her than myself, is she would always say, you're not doing it fast enough. Nothing you ever do is fast enough. You need to be faster. You need to be more efficient. I'm not even kidding you. Okay? And now I understand things. And when we talk about ancestral stuff, I'm like, her parents taught her that she wasn't fast enough. They lashed out at her. They like berated her for not being fast enough. Fast enough at fucking what? You know, it's like, calm down. Now my mom's older age, she really needs to fucking calm down, and she probably never will. So the list is wrapping up, don't worry. Law of attraction, I didn't have on the list, but I just added it because I did mention it quickly. I'm definitely not a specialist on this word. I wouldn't say it's not something I've worked with a lot closely. It's not a vocabulary that I've worked with healers who use a lot. But my understanding of law of attraction is similar to manifesting, and it's that if you believe it, you can call it in kind of thing. And that everything is at our disposition. Everything is, at our disposal, and we just need to believe in it enough to make it fucking happen. The reality with that, the gap again, is that in the law of attraction, it's like, who are we being as we're calling in this stuff? You know what I mean? Like, I can't snap my fingers and be like, I'm gonna have an Audi next week, because the reality of that situation is that financially that is not a viable scenario. And yes, I can like dream it and really believe in it, but the spiritual practice of that involves so much letting go that oftentimes there is that, I think they call it like, is it spiritual bypassing? Anyways, there's a term where it's like you're just trying to put something out there, or say you're doing something or speak of something, but not actually show up and understand the tangible steps that need to take place in order to get there. So law of attraction is really just this belief and this understanding and this faith that there is something greater than us out there that can help us create the life of our dreams. But it doesn't just happen like out of nowhere, out of thin air. It doesn't, okay? And I think sometimes spirituality, these people online that are showing up and really believing in this, you know, myself included, sometimes I've probably, you know, been the embodiment of that for some folks, is really that, you know, you can just like say it and do it. And the best example of that is really these like new moon rituals, and it's just going to occur. It's kind of incoherent, that situation. A couple of the words that I put, I just have like notes everywhere, is authenticity. What is authenticity? It's vulnerability, as I was saying. It's also, it's warmth. It's making people feel good. It is making yourself feel good. It's being warm and fuzzy and kind to yourself because you are in a state of sometimes distress and vulnerability. And that is authentic in and of itself. It's also, authenticity is not having, it's something that I'm so good at that I really suck in all the ways that the real world asks us to be, sometimes composed or save face. You know, in situations like when we work for big companies, I really struggled when I worked at Rogers, which is the publishing company that runs Lulu magazine, for instance. It was very challenging for me. I felt really out of sync there because I didn't want to have to put my best foot forward, play these fucking games that people play in corporate world. I just wanted to be myself. And at the end of the day, that's also why, you know, it is my absolute, like sometimes Nick will joke and he'll be like, you should go work at the government because we live near Ottawa. And he's like, you could have benefits, all things that matter to him. And I get really triggered by that because I'm like, no, I don't, that is terrifying to me. That is something that I don't ever want to have to put myself in a situation to do that. And I'm at a stage in my life now where being vulnerable, I've already kind of paid my debts. I don't need to go back to that, and I will ensure that is not a reality for me. But the vulnerability that I've had to endure in the past was triggering and was uncomfortable, of having to kind of be inauthentic in order to survive certain jobs and certain social ecosystems. Alignment. Alignment is another word. Like, are you in alignment? Be in alignment. Move into your alignment. Alignment is, it is like a wave. It's like a wave that a surfer catches. And if you're at the right place in the ocean at the right time, you catch just the right kind of, there's a word, but anyways, you're just going to catch the right tip of the wave where the wave just carries you. That's alignment, is when you are being carried just through the momentum of energy, and the energy is the wave, right? And the system of like the ocean that has produced that, and the air and all of that. So think of alignment as a wave. You're surfing, you're at the right place in the ocean in the right time, and you catch the right spot of the wave, and the tide just fucking carries you into infinity and beyond. It's momentum. It's momentum. What else do I have here? I have boundaries here, of course. You know, boundaries is a word that also is thrown around a lot, and we're going to speak to it more and more and more. And we've already spoken to it in depth a little bit, I would say here. But boundaries is really prioritizing yourself. It is, you know, thinking of what you want first and foremost and committing to that. And like I've said before, and I will state again and again, that's not something that came easy to me. When I thought about this community, for instance, you know, there's so many things. Some people who have more branding experts even wrote me after and were like, oh, when I launched my website, like, Steph, you should do this way. You shouldn't have a link tree. You should have this page. You should create this. Like, have you thought about doing this? Like, yes and no. You know, it's like the boundary now is really just, how can I be selfish? And I don't care what anybody else is thinking or what anybody else's opinion is, because really, in order for me to be authentic, in order for me to be in alignment, to feel in sync, to feel good about myself, and to feel at peace, I need to show up for my needs first and foremost. And the boundary is where I am comfortable now speaking my truth, more or less so still, depending on certain triggering situations, and really just showing up and being like, I don't want to suffer anymore. Okay? I don't want to suffer anymore. I want to actually be exactly who I am. I want to give myself the freedom to be exactly who I am, the space to be exactly who I am. And that means being selfish in a way, and showing up as an act of self-love, respect for myself, and really just, we should talk about self-love actually before the end of this, and really just deciding what it is that I need in a moment and being at peace and okay with that, because anything else defies the boundary and means suffering for me in the short term or the long term, and sometimes both, right? It's not fucking easy. It's not easy. And sometimes you have to bend the boundary a little bit, but you just gotta recognize that you're bending it so that you can bring it back. Like Quinn's birthday party is in Montreal. Somehow this became this thing. I talked to you guys about it at some point or another. And it's like kind of annoying me that like I'm going to be running around all weekend. And then my mom was like, maybe after Sunday, your mother-in-law's just come back here and stay here. And I was like, I haven't told her yet, but I'm like, no, I'm not doing it. Because Sunday I'm coming home, because that is my boundary, because I know I will be exhausted, because I know I don't sleep well there. And, and I know that she would love to see us and recap everything, but she's just got to learn as well to make the best of the time that we have together on Saturday. So think of what you want, make it a priority. You can't make everyone happy. God, I know you've tried, okay, but it doesn't work. It doesn't work. So you need to prioritize yourself, and that's the boundary, is understanding that you cannot make everyone happy. You're going to disappoint some people, but the people that you're going to make happy are far going to outweigh anyone you could disappoint, including yourself. So show up for yourself. A couple of things I want to mention before I wrap this up. I can't believe this has been an hour. Is really, I want to talk about self-love. Self-love is another word that's thrown around ridiculous amount, maybe a bit less now, or at least I'm seeing it less in my feed. Self-love is, it's a little bit of a boundary, to say the least, and it's really holding yourself accountable for your worth, holding yourself accountable for what is meaningful to you, holding yourself accountable to respect yourself, and holding yourself accountable to put yourself first. It's just this word that I think started out as like, yeah, self-love is like, and in some spaces it still is that, certain marketing will use self-love as like, buy yourself something, treat yourself to something. Treating yourself to something ultimately and actually means doing the thing that society actually doesn't really want us to do and doesn't really encourage us to do. Our female counterparts don't encourage us to do it either, is putting ourselves first, because women are supposed to be just bend over backwards for everyone else. And our mothers taught us that, and our grandmothers taught us that, and rare are the few who have been the cycle breakers in our world, and who have put themselves first and have triggered people around them and have made upset people around them, and have stood up for themselves and stood up for what they believed in, and done all of these things and all of the layers of the words that I mentioned today, and really in that way been spiritual. Because they've really just held their own. There is a part of spirituality that is self-love, absolutely, because it is also just being like, I am going to sacrifice every discomfort to just live my life in peace. And peace is doing all of these things and being authentic and being vulnerable, being open to be vulnerable. So, self-love, yes, it can be treating yourself sometimes, for sure. And other times, and making space for treating yourself. I have a friend who every time she gets a new client, she buys herself something. And so that's kind of law of attraction for her. It's momentum. It's opening up the channel to call in more. It's gratitude. It's saying like, I have abundance. I have enough. I am grateful for what was given to me just now. And I continue to open up that channel and that flow. If that feels right to you, great. For some of us, it wouldn't be unrealistic to say that, calling in another client also means an act of self-love, which is putting up a boundary because your time is being limited, because you've added another client to your list of responsibilities, if you will, right? So boundaries, boundaries, boundaries. And I think the ultimate thing for all of us here, because I'm sure we all believe in it, is the balance. It's not about being saints. It's not, and that's something I've really explored in the last 6 months, I would say, is like my relationship with spirituality is I'm not looking to be a fucking saint. I'm not looking to totally dissociate and disconnect from what is real and what is relatable and what is material and what is like amazing and it just feels materially good in life and pleasant. I've had to do a lot of letting go, and I've had to live with a lot less than I've had in the past in the last couple of years, but that's because of choices that I have made that have been a lot closer to what is meaningful to me. I have stopped living my life for other people. I have stopped trying to build a career in fashion because it was the only perceivable, recognizable, like straight edge kind of thing that I could do. Now I've chosen something that's really niche. I've mentioned it before. People often don't even ask me about what I do anymore. I think it goes like in a handbasket with just becoming a mom, and maybe even the pandemic. It's just kind of like, oh, she's a mom. Like, we don't need to talk about what she does. She's just a mom, That being said, parentheses to that is sometimes I meet mothers and I often hesitate to ask them what they do too, because I don't want to discredit the fact that being a mom is a lot of work. So that's also one of the things, is that I've developed a lot of compassion and empathy and understanding, and I've always had that, but I've really put an accent on that in my spiritual journey, because I have really made space to honor the journey that someone else is going through and respect them and be kind to them and listen to them, and really, try and love and understand them. But that's through my own self-love, right? And my own respect, that I've really accentuated that and made that a priority in the last few years, that I've really been able to come into that. So self-love could be something that is you buy yourself something, just like it could be, something that it could be a boundary. And, a lot of the times in my case, it's going to be more of a boundary than buying myself something. And I think a lot of you would agree with that, I'm pretty sure. I have that suffering is the disidentification of what you identify with for the sake of your future. And I think that is, I think suffering is that suffering and the disidentification, disidentification, even a word, I don't know where I wrote that there, but anyways, suffering is basically like, putting something else, making something else a priority for the sake of your future. And that goes into just being worried about something, or, feeling not enough, that you won't have enough, that there won't be enough, that you need to make someone else happy. So that creates suffering, and that creates misery, and that creates a lack of a boundary. So yeah, let's just wrap it up at that. Let me know if you guys have any questions. This has been so long, a full 60 couple minutes here. And I hope you enjoyed this. I hope it was useful. I hope it was encouraging. I hope it was clarifying. And I welcome any and all questions if you want to move this conversation or have more of this conversation over in the coffee chats thread in Discord, like I mentioned. We can absolutely do that. That's what the space is for. If you want to just put a comment below here, if you want to send me a message, whatever it is. Thank you for watching this. Let me know what resonated with you the most, where you felt you got the most amount of clarity, and what words you're still looking for clarity on, and I will be happy to enlighten you on those. Thank you, loves. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being here, and thank you for watching this. Happy Friday.